What is a true fact so baffling, it should be false? There is a 1 in roughly 5.2 to the 61st power chance that, if you were to slap a table, all of the molecules in your hand in the table would miss each other, and your hand would go through it. Story time. I learned this fact from a deep intellectual conversation with my engineering class 2 years ago, so there very well could be some kind of detail I'm missing here, but nonetheless, what I said is theoretically true. I went to middle school with a guy who lost his ring finger reaching under a lawnmower, and he told me once that the blades move through the rest of his fingers in this way, and that's why he lost only the one finger, and not all 4 of them. Hey, you lost a finger. Nah, I saved 4. I can see how that would make them feel better. Sounds like your friend misremembers. There used to be a radioactive energy drink called Raditha that was in the US market for a decade from 1918 to 1928. Some of the more prominent users had to be buried in lead coffins. Didn't they take that off the market after some guy drank so many of them, so quick that his lower jaw fell off? Oh my god, he did. Apparently he even developed holes in his skull. That's horrifying. Poor dude. Google radium girls. No do. It's not as bad as it sounds. Pro tip, it's actually worse. Apparently there's a movie about it too. Something interesting and eye-opening to look into. What's it called? Radium Girls. Okay. If you are losing limbs, that just means you aren't drinking enough Raditha. Those crappy stock photos. You could take away all of Wayne Gretzky's goals that he scored during his career and he would still be the all-time NHL points leader off his assists alone. Bonus Gretzky fact. He and his brother own the record for being the highest scoring pair of siblings. Brent had 4 points in his whole career. Of every father/son combo in NHL history, Wayne and Trevor Gretzky have the most goals. Trevor Gretzky was a baseball player. Bobby and Brett Hull would like a word. I misspoke earlier. It was career points 1391 for Brett. Bobby has 1170 and Gretzky has 2857. The youngest mother to give birth became pregnant at 4 years old. She's still alive and resides in Lima, Peru apparently. Lina Medina had a rare condition whereby her body went through puberty very early, making it possible for her to conceive a child. Her son was born via cesarean section when she was 5 years and 7 months old and was raised as her younger brother. The father was never fully confirmed, though suspicion fell on male family members. The girl herself obviously had no clear recollection. Sounds like people are stepping on eggshells, making it sound like the woman is like a fucking disguised superhero or something, and details are foggy. She was raped. A family member probably did the raping. And she was 4. He raped a 4-year-old. She had a baby and he didn't get punished. Not surprised GBH. If she's still alive, why can't they DNA test the son? Because the son died in 1979, so they'd have some difficulties getting DNA material from him. It could still happen if they find where he's buried. By any chance, do you know the cause of death? He was 40, but it's only stated that it was natural causes. If a gorilla looks grumpy, it's because they are relaxed and at ease. Resting face. Quite literally. You can boil water in a paper cup over an open flame. One too many bets on camping trips saying I could put a styrofoam cup in the middle of the campfire and it would not burn. Didn't mention I'd fill it with water first. Even so, still had non-believers as I was placing it in the fire. Interesting. The paper cup makes sense, but I would think that with the level of insulation styrofoam provides, it would melt before the heat transferred to the water inside. Or perhaps it's the thin solid polystyrene cup, rather than foam polystyrene cup. Yeah, those would just crumble and burn. It should burn down to the water level. Now, I mean if it's submerged in flames maybe. My chemistry teacher used them in very hot environments as a budget calorimeter. Styrofoam works too? That's even more impressive. That's why I be sipping straight gas when I mix my purple drink. The gravity of black holes is so great that it literally bends light around the black hole, so that if you could somehow stand close enough to a black hole and look straight ahead, you would actually see the back of your own head. Finally I could shave my own neck. Right. I feel this too much. I've cut my own hair for over a decade, but still am not 100% self-sufficient at it. Yeah, but still end up doing that thing with your hand, where you get confused on the angle you're trying to make lol. I hate it so much. A morbidly obese person can survive with absolute starvation without any sickness or feeling ill, under close control. There have been studies since 60s. There is a patient in 1973 who went under a 382-day starvation diet for therapeutic purposes under close control with only vitamin and mineral supplements and water intake without protein, carbohydrate or fat intake, no food at all. Dropped from 207 kilograms to 88 kilograms and maintained it. After a follow-up checkup 5 years later, the patient was 96 kilograms, stabilized. Prolonged fasting had no ill effects. If anybody is curious about the article, the PubMed ID is PMC 2,495,396. Fixed autocorrect. Keep in mind for anyone tempted to imitate, multiple others attempted this after him and wound up dead. Do not try this at home. It requires very strict supervision. From what I remember, a lot of deaths are from when they start eating again. You have to start back extremely slowly. Wait. I remember this came up recently in another thread. It's called refeeding syndrome. I saw this in girls with anorexia and bulimia when I was assisting in a mental health care facility. What are the signs and symptoms? It's essentially severe electrolyte, salts in blood, disturbance due to the abrupt switching on of parts of the metabolism that have been switched off for a long time. The person has been maintaining a fragile balance of normal blood levels of various salts and minerals, but their whole body will be depleted. If fed incautiously and without supplementation, the rise in insulin switches back on various normal processes for storage of energy. These processes rapidly consume the remaining electrolytes in the blood, particularly phosphate, but also potassium, magnesium and others, and normally the blood levels would refill instantaneously from stores in body cells. Unfortunately, those stores have been gradually emptied over the period of starvation, so instead blood levels plummet. Symptoms and signs include muscle weakness, confusion, seizures, cardiac arrhythmias, and death. People were deliberately infected with malaria to cure their syphilis, and the man who developed this treatment, Julius Werner Jauregg, received the Nobel Prize for it. The extremely high fevers of the malaria infections killed the syphilis bacteria, then the patients were cured of the malaria using quinine. I mean, there was no antibiotics at the time and syphilis was extremely dangerous and life-threatening. It was novel, and it worked most of the time. Arsenic also worked, and cleared up your parasitic infections too. It also inoculated you from acute arsenic poisoning when your rival wanted to take you out. Actually, both cups were poisoned. Sounds like literally the worst time though. That's some World War Z shit. Only most of the time. TBF, modern medicine works most of the time. I mean, I'm sure there were some cases of syphilis where the fever caused by the malaria simply wasn't high enough, or the specific syphilis bacteria were more heat resilient, or even that the quinine trying to treat the malaria failed. Shit happens. Or the fever killed them. More people died making the V2 rockets during World War II than were killed by them. Another fun fact about V2 rockets. Germany was facing a large issue with rocket fuel shortages during the project because people kept drinking it. The fuel was made from 70% ethyl alcohol and 30% water, distilled from potatoes. It was the most economically viable fuel at the time, since they were already very low on other fuels. To stop workers from drinking it, they denatured the alcohol, essentially poisoning it, but people kept drinking it anyways and getting extremely ill. This simply caused people to start leaving the V2 program, suggesting that they were only in it for the free alcohol. This also means that any alcohol over 70% ABV is stronger than actual WW2 rocket fuel. During Prohibition in the US, people started drinking industrial alcohol and hardcore prohibitionists insisted that it be denatured by the addition of methanol. The strategy actually backfired because people saw that guys who committed the only crime of sneaking a little banned drink were being punished with blindness and death. Temperance movement folks couldn't care less. In fact, weren't they those hardcore prohibitionists who lobbied for it? So, just like drug prohibition. Less harmful and deadly than drug prohibition, of course. How so? Alcohol prohibition lasted a relatively short time and was not a global prohibition. While organized crime thrived during that time, which of course led to violence and corruption, it pales in comparison to the violence we experience around drug prohibition today. Black market drug trade is the fuel for gangs and cartels to continue killing each other around the world then, and it continues now.